Karen Snider was born on July 29, 1948, in Indiana. She was only 18 at the time of her death, as well as a mother to a 1-year-old baby. She was survived by her husband Paul and her family, who never stopped looking for her. On November 12, 1966, just before 11 p.m., 23-year-old Paul Snider returned to his Calumet City, Illinois home from his shift at the local rail yard. That evening, Paul drove home from work a little faster than normal. During his shift, which began at 3 p.m., he called home many times in an attempt to contact his wife, 18-year-old Karen Snider, but was unsuccessful. To add to his worries, Paul's parents, Frank and Elizabeth Snider, who lived just a few houses away, knocked on the front door at 8 p.m. and received no answer. Karen and Paul had been married for a little more than 1 year. Karen had given birth to their first child, a daughter named Paula, 2.5 months prior. Paul worked for the railroad in the afternoons and evenings, and Karen stayed at home to care for their child. When Paul arrived at the couple's Wilson Street house that night, he noted that the blinds were closed and the front porch light was turned off. This struck him as peculiar, as Karen always left the porch light on for Paul when he arrived home after dark. Paul entered through the house's unlocked front entrance. Inside, he discovered Paula fast asleep in her portable playpen in front of the living room television, with a TV guide open to the evening's lineup on top. He swiftly shifted his attention to Karen, relieved his daughter had not been hurt. As Paul climbed the stairs to the upper level of the house, where the master bedroom was located, he attempted to turn on the overhead light. However, when he pressed the switch, the light did not illuminate. Upstairs, Paul entered the couple's bedroom. He turned on the lamp, and as the room filled with light, Paul was confronted with a horrifying scene. The room was in disarray. There was blood everywhere, and Karen lay dead on the floor, her corpse riddled with stab wounds. Their 2-month-old daughter, Paula, was found safe in her bassinet in another room. Paul immediately contacted the police before seizing Paula and leaving the house. The phone operator who had answered Paul's call called Paul's parents to let them know what was going on. Frank and Elizabeth Snider dashed outdoors, discovering their son sobbing and shouting, "Someone help me! My God, please help me!" With a flashlight in hand, Elizabeth Snider entered the couple's home, hoping to help her daughter-in-law. However, as she approached the bedroom, she discovered Karen was already gone and nothing could be done to revive her. Police arrived on the scene shortly afterward. Police interviewed Karen's relatives, friends, and neighbors. During interviews with Paul's parents, Elizabeth Snider told investigators that Karen confided in her shortly before her death that she was afraid to live at the house, but she did not explain why. Karen informed Elizabeth that she wanted to return home to Cedar Lake, Indiana, where her parents lived. Investigators also spoke with Karen and Paul's elderly neighbors, John and Rosalie Lenda Barker. According to them, their dog, Nicky, had not barked that evening, even though he usually did so at the drop of a pin. Rosalie informed the officers that if Nicky had barked, she would have heard it and gotten up to check. When authorities determined that the break-in appeared to have been staged, Paul was named as a probable suspect in the investigation. Paul was finally cleared after additional testing on evidence acquired from the scene. Evidence sent to a Chicago crime lab for examination revealed that 2 types of blood were detected at the scene: type O from Karen and type A from her killer. Paul wasn't a match for either. While the majority of the blood found at the scene belonged to Karen, it was discovered that samples obtained from the blood trail near the shattered window, the laundry found in the bathtub, and the light bulb found in the bedroom all belonged to Karen's killer. Several other potential suspects were brought in for interrogation, including an unknown 23-year-old local guy who police dubbed Suspect Number 1. According to them, on the night Karen was murdered, the man went to a local hospital for aid with a major cut on his hand that required numerous stitches. According to the man's medical records, his blood type was identical to Karen's murderer. Investigators' suspicions were heightened when they discovered that the anonymous suspect was a friend of Paul and Karen, who had previously visited their home several times. Several witnesses came forward that evening, identifying him as having visited 2 local taverns near the Snider home. When the man's wife was questioned, she admitted that on the night of the murder, he arrived home late, drunk, with his hand stitched up and a severe gash on his forehead. Her husband was supposed to be an alcoholic, so this was not altogether unexpected. The man was questioned, but he denied any knowledge of Karen's murder. According to him, he left the tavern that evening and tripped over a tree stump on his way home, hurting his head and slicing his finger on the jagged wood. As the bleeding continued, he went to the local hospital before returning home late that evening. With no tangible proof against him, the individual was subsequently released. Investigators continued to look for Karen's killer, but when leads dried up, the case went cold and has remained thus ever since. Karen's mother, June, was interviewed 4 years after her daughter's murder. In the interview, she stated that on the day of Karen's death, she heard her house phone ring around 4 p.m., stating, quote, "Probably a wrong number, but it could have been Karen." June softly told the interviewer. When something like this happens, she continued, while wiping the tears away, you ask yourself if there is a God. June ended by answering her question. Unfortunately, both of Karen's parents died before receiving the answers they so badly wanted. Russell, Karen's father, died in 1973, and June in 1977. Following Karen's murder, Paul and Paula moved in with his parents, Elizabeth and Frank Snider. A few years later, Paul remarried Connie, and the two of them raised Paula. Paul passed away in 1989 at the age of 45. In 2009, Paula and some of Karen's siblings spoke with a local newspaper, confirming that they are still actively looking for answers to her murder. They are hopeful that one day, Karen's killer will be apprehended, and a mystery that has tortured their family for almost 50 years will be resolved. My condolences go out to her family. Rest in peace, Karen. Thanks for watching.